The beginning of the evening carried an air of grandeur and celebration. It was an exclusive dinner held in New York to mark the official launch of the promotional campaign for the 2026 World Cup, which would be hosted on American soil. The event brought together businessmen, renowned athletes, celebrities, and politicians, all seated in a luxurious hall adorned with flags from various countries, LED screens displaying historic football moments, and an atmosphere that blended anticipation with vanity. Among the distinguished guests was N'Golo Kanté, the French world champion known not only for his impeccable football skills, but also for his remarkable humility. He had been invited to participate in a roundtable discussion about the social impact of sports and how athletes could inspire positive change off the field. For now, though, he moved quietly through the room, observing the bustle without drawing attention to himself. A few meters away, almost invisible to the elite crowd, a young waiter named Lucas struggled to balance a tray of canapés while weaving through the guests. He had started the job just a few weeks earlier, and this was his first major event. Nervous but dedicated, he took his work seriously. He knew he needed the job to help his mother and pay for his studies. As he circulated, he approached a group engaged in lively conversation. Extending the tray, he caught the eye of an elegant woman dressed in a designer black gown and a pearl necklace. She looked at him with disdain. With a fake smile and a voice dripping with arrogance, she remarked loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Oh, look at this. Even the waiters are trying to dress like important people now. How adorable, this attempt to seem relevant." The group laughed. Lucas froze. He felt the blood drain from his face, his eyes welling up, but he stood still, trying to suppress the humiliation washing over him. He didn't know whether to leave, respond, or pretend he hadn't heard. His chest ached, not from the insult itself, but from the way she reduced him to nothing in front of everyone. Kanté, watching the scene from across the room, saw the woman's look, heard the laughter, and noticed the young waiter's shaken stance. Without hesitation, he crossed the hall with purposeful strides. His presence was immediately felt, as if the energy in the room had shifted. The group that had been laughing fell silent as they realized who was approaching. Reaching Lucas's side, Kanté placed a hand on his shoulder with a gentle, almost brotherly gesture and looked directly at the woman. "Excuse me," he said in his characteristically calm tone, "but I believe respect should be the main course at any dinner." The room went quiet. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. The woman tried to mask her discomfort with a nervous smile but found no words. Kanté then turned to Lucas and said, with a genuine smile, "You're doing a great job. And you're more important to this event than many realize." Lucas couldn't respond. The words caught in his throat, and the tears he'd tried to hold back spilled uncontrollably. He could never have imagined that someone like Kanté, so admired worldwide, would stand up for him, and with such kindness. He sobbed quietly, wiping his face with his sleeve, while Kanté, unhurried, stayed by his side, as if signaling to the world that there was dignity here. At that moment, a man rose from the head table, accompanied by discreet cameras and attentive gazes. It was none other than Donald Trump, present as a key figure in the World Cup organization. He walked slowly toward the center of the room, observing everything with keen eyes and an expression hard to read. The crowd, already stunned by Kanté's actions, was now on edge. What would Trump do? How would he react? He approached, extended a hand to Kanté, and looking around at everyone, said loudly, "At an event where we celebrate football, what we just witnessed was a true lesson in humanity. This man," pointing to Kanté, "reminded us that it's not just about goals and trophies, it's about respect, about character." Kanté thanked him with a slight nod but seemed uneasy with the spotlight. Meanwhile, Lucas, still overwhelmed, tried to process whether this was all real. The murmur grew. Cameras began capturing the moment. Social media, sports blogs, and the press at large were about to turn this simple dinner into something much bigger. But for now, all that existed was a young waiter in tears, a humble world champion by his side, and a room full of people rethinking what greatness truly means. The atmosphere in the hall had shifted entirely. The respectful silence that followed Donald Trump's words soon gave way to a mix of admiring whispers and discreet applause. Some guests, previously indifferent, now looked at Lucas with a quiet respect, perhaps ashamed for not having spoken up earlier. Others remained visibly uncomfortable, fidgeting with their champagne flutes as if trying to shake off a collective embarrassment. Lucas, meanwhile, was still trembling. He didn't know how to react. He tried wiping his eyes and adjusting his uniform, as if that could help him return to the place he thought he belonged. That of a waiter, unseen, efficient, silent. But that place no longer seemed to exist. Something had changed within him, something he couldn't erase. KANTÉ stayed by his side, steady as ever. With a calm gesture, he lightly touched Lucas's arm and asked, "Would you like to take a walk with me?" Lucas could only nod in agreement. The two stepped away from the center of the hall and headed to a small balcony at the back, decorated with warm lights and ornamental plants. Outside, the sounds of the city felt more real than the theater unfolding inside the hall. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. KANTÉ looked at him with that serene gaze of someone who sees beyond the surface. Sometimes the world tries to convince us that our worth lies in what we wear, who we know, or what we have, KANTÉ said with quiet wisdom. But don't forget, you have value simply for being who you are, for your work, your story, your heart. Don't accept less than that from anyone. Lucas lowered his eyes. The words hit him deeply. He wasn't used to hearing such things, especially not from someone he admired so much. Sensing the weight of the moment, KANTÉ smiled and lightened the tone. "And look, you brought down half the big shots in the room tonight with just a shy glance and a tray of canapés. That's more than I've ever managed on a packed field." Lucas laughed for the first time that night. A soft, half-disbelieving but genuine laugh. He felt accepted, seen. It was as if life had shone a spotlight on him, not to expose him, but to illuminate what had always been hidden. Inside the hall, Trump returned to his table, lost in thought. KANTÉ's actions had touched him in an unexpected way. For years, he'd been at the center of attention, surrounded by grand speeches and power plays. But there, in that simple exchange between a football star and a young worker, he'd witnessed a strength that didn't come from shouting or influence. It came from humility. Aides approached to discuss the incident, but he waved them off, needing time to think. Deep down, Trump knew that if handled well, this moment could mean something bigger for the event, and perhaps even for his own public image. But beyond that, he wondered, why had something so small made such an impact? Maybe because genuine kindness, so rare these days, has a power that people recognize instantly, even if they try to hide it. On the balcony, KANTÉ and Lucas were interrupted by an event photographer who asked for a picture of them together. Lucas hesitated, but KANTÉ nodded. The photo was taken. The star with his arm around the waiter's shoulders, both sharing a smile. Not for the cameras, but a reflection of true respect and affection. Back in the hall, the dinner continued, now more subdued. The woman who had sparked the incident sat silently, visibly shaken, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Some guests whispered about her identity, but when a journalist approached KANTÉ for comment, he simply said, "I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm here to remind everyone that we all deserve respect." That statement spread quickly. Social media erupted with the hashtag #JoshAmbassador of Humility. Short clips of the scene went viral. Comments from people across the globe praised KANTÉ's gesture and the natural way he defended an ordinary worker. Lucas, still in a daze, didn't want to return to the hall, but KANTÉ encouraged him. "Come with me. Tonight you'll dine as a guest." "But I can't. I'm just a waiter," Lucas stammered, hesitant. KANTÉ placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Tonight you're the most important guest here, and no one will tell you otherwise." And so they returned. The MC, briefed on the situation, quickly announced over the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. KANTÉ would like to introduce a special new guest to our table of honor, Lucas, who tonight gave us a lesson in dignity and strength." The applause this time was loud and heartfelt. Stunned, Lucas was led to a seat beside KANTÉ, facing eyes that had once overlooked him but now truly saw him. Meanwhile, Donald Trump spoke quietly with his aides and FIFA representatives. Something was being planned behind the scenes, something big, but Lucas didn't know that yet. In that moment, all that mattered was the unprecedented feeling of being valued, not for status or appearance, but simply for being human. He didn't realize it, but his life was about to change forever. The night stretched on, but it was no longer just a gala dinner. What had seemed like a routine event to promote the 2026 World Cup had transformed into a symbol. Lucas's name was on everyone's phones. Social media buzzed with videos and photos of the moment KANTÉ stood up for him, each comment and share restoring a bit of collective faith in humanity. Seated at the table of honor, Lucas still felt out of place, as if he were living someone else's dream. But KANTÉ made a point of including him in every conversation, always kind, always respectful. Lucas was no longer just a waiter, he was a symbol of the invisible dignity millions carry every day, silently waiting to be noticed. Across the room, Donald Trump remained deep in discussion with FIFA officials and event organizers. With his characteristic decisiveness, he seemed to be not only reflecting on the night's impact, but also crafting an announcement no one anticipated. His gaze occasionally fell on KANTÉ and Lucas, and curiously, there was no arrogance in his expression. There was respect. Just before dessert, the hall's lights dimmed softly. The MC returned to the stage, visibly excited. "Ladies and gentlemen, please your attention. We have a special message to close this unforgettable night. I invite to the stage the former president and member of the 2026 World Cup Organizing Committee, Donald Trump." A respectful silence settled over the room as Trump took the stage. This time, he set aside notes and spoke directly, his voice firm. Tonight, this event was overtaken by something none of us expected. And frankly, something no amount of money, campaign, or publicity could have created. We witnessed a real, human, powerful moment. An athlete the world admires stood up, not for fame, not for gain, but for principle. He defended someone he didn't even know, simply because it was the right thing to do. Trump paused, surveying the room, his eyes resting on KANTÉ and Lucas. "And that's why," he continued, "I'm announcing today, with the full support of FIFA and the organizing committee, that N'Golo KANTÉ will be the official ambassador of the 2026 World Cup. But not only that," he raised his voice as he often did, "KANTÉ will be the first to hold the title of Ambassador of Humility, representing the true spirit of the sport, respect, equality, and empathy." The hall erupted in applause. Cameras captured every second. Journalists scrambled to record every word. KANTÉ, visibly surprised, stood up. As he joined Trump on stage, he was greeted with a warm handshake. Lucas, still at the table, couldn't hold back his tears. KANTÉ, as ever, kept it simple. "I don't do anything expecting rewards. I just try to be the man my mother raised me to be. And tonight, the real hero here is Lucas. I only did what anyone should have done." The crowd applauded again. But unlike many, KANTÉ didn't linger in the spotlight. He thanked the audience, took the microphone, and said, "Excuse me, I'd like to invite someone to join me up here." He pointed to Lucas. The young man hesitated, but the applause gently urged him forward. His face still etched with the night's emotions, he stepped onto the stage, trembling slightly. At his side, KANTÉ placed a hand on his back and faced the crowd. "This is Lucas, and I propose that he be named one of the representatives of the World Cup's social campaign. Let his story, as a worker and a dreamer, be told. Let him visit schools, sports centers, and speak to youth from every corner. Because he represents millions of people who keep this world turning, often without being seen." The entire room rose to its feet. They cheered. They shouted Lucas's name. Someone began clapping rhythmically, and soon everyone joined in. "Lucas! Lucas! Lucas!" he cried. But this time it was different. It wasn't the pain of humiliation anymore. It was the shock of being recognized. The overwhelming realization that his life hadn't just changed. He was now part of something far greater. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The scene spread across the globe. News broadcasts in every language told the story of the waiter who became a World Cup symbol. Lucas was invited to interviews, received scholarship offers, sponsorships, and messages of support from every continent. Yet he stayed grounded, perhaps because he now had an unexpected mentor in KANTÉ who insisted on guiding him through his first engagements, ensuring the young man didn't lose himself in the sudden glare of fame. Trump, meanwhile, earned widespread praise for Kanté's unexpected appointment. Many noted that, for the first time in a long while, football showed its power wasn't just in stadiums, but in the quiet acts that change lives. And so, when the 2026 World Cup finally began months later, amid ceremonies and speeches, a special moment followed the opening. On the main stadium's giant screen, before millions of viewers worldwide, a video recounted that night in New York. It showed Lucas, Kanté, the act of respect, and the transformation of a life. At the video's end, a simple phrase echoed through the stadium. Greatness isn't about being bigger than others, but about remembering everyone has worth. And there, hand in hand on the field, stood N'Golo Kanté, the ambassador of humility, and Lucas, the symbol of a World Cup born from a gesture of respect. The world applauded, and in that moment, more than a World Cup, it was a triumph of humanity being celebrated.